Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Underdog episode. Today, we have Season 4, Episode 8, Alert. A droplet of rain hits against a metal roof, splashing off into the air and landing back onto the roof. It cuts the rain pouring inside the grate on the roof of the warehouse. Inside, the wind is practically pounding on the walls as Zara and Miranda are standing in front of Alan's deceased body, the hole in his head still going clean through. Off to the side, Jake is still slumped on the brown couch. Zara stares down at the body, her mouth a straight line. Miranda has her hands on her hips and is having a hard time looking at Alan and has the same expression as Zara. Zara's stomach swirls, making her put her hands on the closest table and leaning over it. Miranda glances over to her but stays put. Zara throws up on the other side of the table and wipes her mouth off with the back of her hand. She leans back up and steps back next to Miranda, turning her head to her. Who killed him? Miranda closes her eyes and swallows, remembering the events. I don't know, but it was a serpent. So you didn't see in time? The place caught up in flames. Zara furrows her brows and looks over to Miranda. The whole place? Afire? Zara squints as Miranda nods, keeping silent. Zara lets out a shaky sob. We'll bury him first thing in the morning. Miranda nods again, stepping away from the body. Zara goes up to Alan's body and places a hand on his limp arm, looking at the bullet hole in his head. We'll give whoever did this justice. Zara gives Alan's arm a squeeze before turning around and walking away. It cuts to a black screen with heavy breathing coming in short gasps. Shuffling can be heard, and a small tunnel of white appears as small rubble falls down. More moving can be heard as more tiny particles of dirt continue to drop. It cuts to Dylan walking through a forest with the wanderer blades gripped in his hands. It cuts to a serpent hiding behind a tree, holding onto their left forearm. He lifts his hand, and the arm has a huge gash cut through the skin. He grimaces and lets out a deep exhale, lowering his hand back onto the gash. It cuts back to Dylan. He raises the right blade and slices across a tree to his right, sending the bark flying. He keeps walking and brings up the left blade, stabbing it through a different tree, hitting nothing on the other side. He pulls out the blade and spins off the excess bark. It cuts back to the serpent behind the tree, and he glances around the trunk and sees Dylan quickly retracting to fully behind the tree. Dylan notices this and starts walking towards a tree at a faster pace. Dylan turns the corner around the tree, holding the point of his right blade at the serpent's neck. Where's your leader? The serpent steps further back into the tree, sliding up against it. I don't know. The serpent flinches for the pistol on his hip, but Dylan stops his hand with his powers, crunching his hand into a pained fist. Dylan steps closer with the blade still pointed at the man. Tell me, and I'll let you go. How do I know you're not lying? Dylan takes another step closer, leaning his face closer to the serpent's. You want to find out? You let your friend die. Dylan's face drops a tad before he steps even closer, making the blade's tip press slightly against the man's black cloth-covered neck. Where is your leader? Up your ass. Dylan sighs and steps away from the serpent, beginning to walk away. The serpent slides down the tree and places a hand over his neck, scanning for any cuts. As Dylan continues walking, he launches one of the blades at the serpent's stomach, impaling him and the tree. Dylan calls for the blade back, and immediately it flies back to his hand, and he grips back onto it and wipes the blood onto his suited hip, continuing to storm away from the collapsing body. It cuts to Misner walking in a small brush forest. Two serpents surround him by the sides and are walking with him. The one on his right is a short man with a bushy beard, and the one on his left is a tall woman with a short black ponytail bunched in the back of her hair. All three of them have ash covered on their faces and scattered in their hair. They also are all armed with their rifles. The serpent to the right of Misner looks over to him, beginning to speak. What's the plan, sir? What's the plan, sir? Misner steps over a branch and looks around the dark forest. We're headed to Compound B. What about A? Misner glances at the serpent on his right before turning his head forward again. He knows where it is. The serpent to Mesner's left speaks up. That was Wiley's group, right? Yeah. The serpent on the left closes her eyes for a moment and takes a deep breath before looking back at Misner. Did Underdog kill them all? It's always him. Misner removes a hand from his rifle and grabs onto a bundle of vines connected by 2 trees. He pulls it to the side and walks through the opening, with the 2 serpents following behind. Past the vines, a small white-painted metal building with the words Compound B sits there, covered in vines and shrubbery. After the male serpent walks through, the vine falls back in place. Misner goes up to the compound's door and grabs a knob, twisting it and pushing the door open. Inside, Misner flips the lights on. The room is painted white and is bleak and empty, besides the whiteboard, radio system, and black tables set up along the walls. Misner places his rifle on one of the tables and steps over to the radio system, wiping his nose. He flips 2 of the switches up and holds down onto a square button on top of the system. As the radio crackles, he takes a deep breath before beginning a transmission. Is there anyone there? Misner lifts his finger off the button and leans on the table. The radio is on and waits for a response. Eventually, a garbled voice comes through. Yes, dog chasing. You're cutting out. Pietro, is that you? Pietro's voice sounds again, clearer this time. Clear that he's out of breath. It's Underdog. He's here. The radio's crackles die down, and silence fills the room. Misner sighs and bends over, leaning his head on the radio. It cuts to Pietro running through a forest, glancing over his shoulder repeatedly. Suddenly, one of the Wanderer blades goes flying past his face, blowing the right side of his hair into the air. The blade stops its flight and starts to retract the other way. Pietro watches as the blade makes its path. It cuts to Dylan, who catches the blade whilst he's walking in the direction Pietro is running in. Stop running, and maybe you'll live! Dylan shouts across the trees, but Pietro doesn't stop running. Dylan quickens his pace, deciding to still not fly. It cuts back to Pietro, who's starting to slow down, the air in his lungs running out. Beyond Pietro, Dylan is running now, both blades still in hand. As he gets close enough, Dylan jumps into the air and brings the right blade behind his head before slashing it down at Pietro. Seeing this, Pietro dodges to the left, making Dylan miss his slash. Dylan quickly regathers himself and uses his powers to push Pietro up against a tree, holding him snug against it. Dylan goes up to him. Where is your leader? You'll kill me anyway, like you did to Maxwell. Dylan takes a deep breath before talking in a sarcastic tone. I promise you won't meet the same fate as Maxwell. Pietro looks over Dylan's face and thinks for a moment. Fine. Keep going forward for a few more miles and you'll find a building hidden in some bushes. See? Was that so hard? Dylan shakes his head and lifts his powers off of Pietro and turns the direction he was previously running. Without a second thought, Pietro runs away into more of the dense forest. It cuts to a mix of harsh wind blowing through a downpour of rain. A tornado cuts through the wind and rain, sloshing it around. A groan can be heard, and it cuts to Jake on the couch, gasping awake. This makes Miranda turn around and look at him. You alright? Jake shifts on the couch and sits on it, looking back at Miranda.
Yeah.
Jake leans over and rubs his temple, trying to slow his breaths. Miranda walks in front of him and crosses her arms over her chest. Just tell me what's wrong. Jake glances up before looking back at the ground.
I just had a nightmare. It's nothing.
Miranda squints at Jake and steps closer. About what? Jake stares at the ground for a while, making his eyes water from not blinking. He looks up and finally blinks.
A tornado.
That's it? Jake sighs and shakes his head. Just rain and wind and stuff. Huh. Sounds boring. You hear that? Jake and Miranda stop talking and listen closer. The wind is swirling and banging against the warehouse walls and roof, along with rain falling against the metal roof. I think somehow I've heard the future. Miranda just stands there, blinking and looking blankly at Jake, watching as his face suddenly drops.
Is that Alan?
Jake is looking off into the warehouse. Miranda turns around and looks at Alan's dead body laying on a table next to the other wall of the warehouse. The, serpents got him. Jake sighs and starts to rub his temples again.
Hey, where's Zara?
It cuts to Mandy sitting on a stool in front of a wood frame holding a blank canvas. She's wearing an apron and has a palette of paint on the tray next to her. She's sitting there staring at the canvas thinking. A knock interrupts her thinking and she leans up and gets off the stool. She walks out of the small room and goes to the front door, looking through the peephole. She lets out a tiny chuckle before twisting the knob and opening the door. Aren't you the one who broke in? The camera cuts to a shot behind Mandy showing Zara standing past the door frame. I need to talk to you. Alright? What's up? Zara clasps her hands together and takes a deep breath. Could I come in first? Mandy nods and moves out the way of the door, letting Zara in. Mandy shuts the door as Zara enters. Inside, Mandy crosses her arms and waits for Zara to start. So, Zara clears her throat and shifts her body, and Mandy watches. Last night, there was a situation. Mandy squints her eyes at Zara, and Zara waves her hand at Mandy. Let me explain. So, Alan was there, okay? Mandy swallows a lump down her throat, and her face drops slightly. He got shot and didn't survive. Mandy sighs and rubs her eyes with one hand. Couldn't he run away? I don't know the exacts. I just know that this group of mercenaries captured him. Are you guys having a funeral? Zara freezes and looks up at Mandy. So about that, what has Alan told you? Well, I know he's at Speedster. Okay, that's a good start. Anything about a dream realm? Mandy raises her eyes and tilts her head at Zara. Alright, so no, he didn't. Zara looks around Mandy's house, thinking and thinking. She sighs and looks back at Mandy. Think about a mirror. There's two of you, right? The dream realm is like that. An exact copy of you, just in a different world. Mandy takes a deep breath and puts a hand to her face, trying to comprehend. So, he's from this dream realm? Yeah, and he used to be a really bad guy. Bad how? Zara raises her hands but lowers it and clicks her tongue. He got better. Mandy gives a hesitant nod. So, do you know anything about how he died? All we know is he got shot in the head. I'm sorry, Mandy. It's fine, I barely knew him. Well, I mean, you guys were technically related. Mandy glares at Zara, making Zara shrink down a bit. That's all I wanted to say. Alright. Thanks. Zara walks to the front door before being stopped by Mandy. If you learn anything about it, please tell me. Zara gives a quick nod before turning back to the door and exiting. It cuts back to Compound B, and Misner and the two serpents are still crowded around the radio system, waiting for something. Anything. Misner is leaned over the table with the radio and is silent as he's listening. A rustle comes from outside the building, and all three look up at the direction of the sound. The two serpents arm their weapons and step towards the door. Misner puts his hand up and motions for the serpents to ease their weapons, them doing so. Might be one of us. Misner walks over to a small monitor screen and switches it on. A black and white static screen displays. The two serpents look to Misner for what to do next. As Misner sees the blank display, he looks over to the serpents. It's a hostile. Probably him. The two serpents arm their guns again and start walking towards the door again, standing on either side of it. Let him come to us. Misner walks away from the monitor and stands in front of the door from a distance, pulling out his pistol and cocking it back, before aiming it at the door. More rustling can be heard outside, making all three of them tighten their grip on their respective weapons. As the noises outside increase in proximity and speed, the three become more and more prepared for whoever is outside. Misner looks at the two serpents and sees their facial expressions. The girl looks hardened and ready, but the boy looks fearful and scared. Alex. Alex flinches at his name being called, but quickly fixes himself and stands straighter. Focus. Alex gives a sharp nod before turning back to the door, along with Misner, who's facing the door. Along with Misner, who's also facing the door. The noises outside stop completely, and the three are locked onto the door. The door's knob begins to twist slowly. The knob finishes its turn, and the door is flung open. Misner fires a panic shot, but strangely, there's nobody at the door. Misner looks at the girl serpent and nods his head for her to go outside. Obligingly, the girl goes in front of the door and steps outside and looks to her left and right, seeing nothing. She turns around as she shakes her head. As she's about to walk back into the building, one of the Wanderer blades goes straight through her stomach before sliding out and making her body collapse to the ground. Outside the compound, Underdog stands there in full suit, holding both Wanderer blades. As Misner and the serpent start to shoot, Dylan enters the building and freezes the bullets midair. Dylan jabs the handle of his left blade into the face of the boy's serpent, knocking him out. Misner steps back as he ejects the magazine out of his pistol and fumbles with another one to put in. Dylan continues to storm towards Misner, making him give up on the pistol. Misner raises his fist and throws a punch at Dylan. Dylan takes the punch with a tiny flinch, but continues going forward. When Dylan reaches Misner, he punches him right in the face, making him stumble back into the wall behind him. Misner tries to attack back, but Dylan pins him against the wall and digs one of the blades into his hip, causing him to yelp. "You caused this!" Misner grimaces as the pain from his hip hits him. "I thought you were a good guy, but killing all my men. I guess I thought it wrong." Dylan scrunches his eyebrows and stares at Misner before pulling the blade out, but keeping him stuck against the wall. "You don't know shit about me." Misner puts a hand over his wounded hip. "I know plenty. You're out for carnage." "Nah." Dylan pulls back out of breath and holsters the Wanderer's blades onto his back. "I don't want to see your face ever again. I'm only sparing you because you're not worth killing." Misner leans his head down and continues holding onto his hip, taking deep breaths. "Understand? Whatever." Misner spits a glob of blood onto the floor and droops his head. With that, Dylan walks out the front door and slams the door behind him. It cuts to black sneakers running against the muddy grass with the warehouse in the close distance. The person's sweatpants are soaked by rain as it continues to fall along with the wind sloshing their pants. The person reaches the warehouse door and slings it open. It cuts to an overview shot of the whole warehouse. Miranda is standing next to Jake, who's bent over with his hands over his ears, screaming. Zara steps into the warehouse, her hair drenched. "What's going on?" Miranda flings her head up from Jake to Zara. He just started spazzing out." Zara runs toward Jake and leans down to get on his level. "Hey, Jake, can you hear me? Hey, Jake, can you hear me?" Jake flicks his eyes at Zara, tears forming in them. He gives a small nod, his hands still over his ears. "Is it the wind again?" Zara speaks out in a soft voice. Jake shakes his head, grimacing again. "What is it then?" Jake leans up and starts to scream again. "He's waking up!" Zara removes Jake's hand from his ears and her face drops to immediate terror. It cuts to an angle to the side of the two. Blood is falling from Jake's ears. Zara takes a step back and puts a hand over her mouth. Jake's eyes begin to overflow with tears. Who is waking up?" Zara's voice cracks as tears of her own begin to flow. "What?" Jake's voice comes out wobbly. I can't hear anything." Zara lets out a shaky breath and pulls Jake into an embrace. The blood from Jake's ears starting to hit Zara's shoulders. Zara looks over to Miranda, who's standing awkwardly, not knowing what to do. "Go outside. Check the grave." Miranda furrows her eyebrows. "You really think just go check?" Miranda nods and exits the warehouse into the rainy night. She looks to her right before walking forward more and going up to the left of the warehouse. She looks up on the hill where the grave is visible. It cuts to an angle in front of the grave. The dirt is completely separated at the middle. The camera zooms in until a chain-covered hand shoots out from the grave, and the screen cuts to black.